Alright. Good morning, good morning. Just getting everybody set up here. And we can shrink all of these. And up and over. I can see you. Alright. So last time we left off working this area, getting these kind of knotted forms together. And can continue with that, I believe. So I think that's a good idea. Just move that out a little bit with the there we go. 1 and 2. Shrink these. That's down a lot. There we go. That's better. There we go. All right. So where are we at? Right here. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to my morning drawing session. Let's see. Let's see. Good morning. Let's see. You're up there. Let's see. Good morning. Welcome to the morning study session. Let's see. Good morning. Mhm. Let's see, let's look that up. Let's see. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to my little morning study session. Got these scales. Good morning. It's a little orange outside today. We're grateful for Canada sending their smoke our way. So appreciate that, Canada. All right, where are we at? All right. Dino, no. This is a not a beard dragon. This is a horned lizard bust. So it's a lizard from the American Southwest. If you're not familiar with it, so that's what it looks like. There's a few different varieties of them that I have here. Like this is different than this one up here, but they're the same. You know, different species of the same kind of lizard. That's what they look like. They're not that big. You know, maybe like that big, right? You know, probably like about a little bit bigger than my hand with the tail tacked on. And they do something interesting though. They have a defense mechanism. So if they're afraid, or you know, they're about to be attacked by something, or you know, something's checking them out that they don't like, they will squirt blood out of their eyes. So they'll shoot blood out of their eyes at you. I don't know how far they can shoot it, but yeah. But the horned lizard, they're pretty cool. Um, so yeah, that's what it is. It's the horned lizard, and um, yeah. So if you're not familiar, you should definitely check them out. They're a cool breed of lizard. Not to be confused with the Gila monster that lives out there. Yeah, so yeah, definitely check them out. I think they're cool. But I mean, I'm working on a morning study project here, so I wanted to kind of get into the Blender thing a bit more, and I've been doing it off and on for the last couple of years. Um, for a good chunk of June, May, I was working on the material nodes, which is not that interesting. Yeah, blood spitting dragon. But it comes out of their eyes, so it's like laser eyes, which is a little bit cooler than squirting it out of their mouth, right? Um, you know, like I said, in reality, it's probably like that big. So, um, but they're definitely super cool lizards. I like them. But yeah, I wanted to get more into Blender, so I've been kind of going through different parts of it recently. Um, um, yeah, so I was pulling the sculpting area. They added some new brushes too that might be interesting. interesting to play with. They just updated Blender yesterday or the day before yesterday to 5.2. And so in here they've added a sort of kind of masking brush that's newish, and then they also added in it's called a scene project. It's like you can put some geometry in here, and it'll flatten out to whatever is below it, or take the shape of whatever is below it. Which can be really handy for a number of things, like panels and yeah, so I was jumping into the sculpting area. I used to do a bit of sculpting with ZBrush and later with Nomad Sculpt, which I both like. ZBrush went, what's the first one? It went subscription model a few years ago when they got acquired by Maxon. And they own a number of different programs. And I've noticed they really haven't really updated very much. I mean, there's like a few new things here and there, but is it worth the subscription? No, I don't think so. And then again, there's apps like there are things it does that others don't do as well. Like they have insert multi-mesh brushes, which you can sort of do in Blender, which you can basically draw objects onto other objects, and they're separate bits of geometry. And there's settings you change in Blender where you can do that with other things. But so that works. They also added VDM brushes, which are basically 3D stuff that you can add on top. You can like sculpt an ear or an eye or a tooth or other kinds of objects, and then it turns into a brush that you can literally just like draw on top of another object, which I haven't gotten into here yet. But the big thing that ZBrush and even Nomad Sculpt have over Blender is that you can get a lot more geometry and detail without it impacting your computer very much. I think they've said they've improved that significantly in here, so I'm curious to see when I bump into that if how much that affects me. So I'm running like a 3060 on here. So that's one of the also one of the big problems with digital sculpting in general. You got to do with all of the technical aspects where you kind of have to. It's a bit of a hurdle to overcome. Is getting through all of the technical stuff, especially in a program like Blender where there's just a lot going on. It's different than like an iPad app like Nomad Sculpt or Procreator Infinite Painter, where you can kind of just like jump in and start making stuff. And there's the depth is really good, but it does make it a challenge to get into Blender. But I feel a lot more comfortable with it, kind of working with it on and off for the last few years, and feel like I get it a lot more. Like it was really frustrating to work with initially. But I'm one of those kind of strange people that like to work through their frustrations until get something. And, yeah, as long as I see it as like something worth pursuing. If there's something in there I want. So, and of course, Blender is free, which is great. Yeah, you can buy a lot of different plugins and extensions that will add to its functionality. So definitely recommend if you haven't tried it. There are like a number of YouTube videos and things that will kind of walk you through the basics of Blender and then get you into sculpting. If you haven't tried that. So, yeah, definitely recommend it. Working up here. Kind of working over here with these eyes. These things are really seeing going a little bit bigger. Especially you. Start with you, I guess. You. Spot. That's better. So I was going to deal with that. See, let's go objects, object, edit, edit. There. Hey, Bosch. Wrong one. That one. Edit. All these need to be like a little bit bigger and closer. is fine. Press it. Too fast. Alright. Let's go into sculpt mode. We're going to trim this guy. I'll move this around a bit. So. Good morning. Let's see where that brush goes. Trim. See, turn it on. Front faces. Little setting where you have to, you want to not pull from the back. I'm just drawing up here. So they're called front facing. And, it's a little setting in the brush area. You have to turn on. And then turn on. So it's yanking stuff it wasn't supposed to yank. Make sure it's on. It pulls from the full sphere of the radius of the brush. So if you don't have that on, it will pull from other areas too. I generally like to have it on all the time. But, there are a lot of circumstances where I'd want to have that on, or off rather. So if you turn it off, then you start pulling on stuff you didn't necessarily intend. brush on this guy. This thing's pretty good angle on that. Line trim. Faces. Like that. It's a little fatter at the bottom, but not more padded. Well, it's a little rounded, but not that round. I'm trying to round out. Inflate the base. Let's get the next one here. Next is you. Let's get this guy squashed a bit. Try. It's still too fat for this, but base will be fatter. So maybe I can bring it up that way. It'll be sharper. So it's that side view. There you are. A lot of these pull pretty sharp at the very tips. So if I grab this and inflate it, sharpen it. Pull it out. Like that. Do the same for you. That's better. Nice and sharp. Do the same thing. These other ones are more hooked, and that one's more straight out. I'm sure for good reason. So looks like it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I numbered them on here so that I can track who is who. You get these 6. That should be 5. That should be 6. This guy's way over here. Good morning. Welcome to my little morning study today. doing a detailed study of a horned lizard. So that's a plan for about an hour and a half in the morning. Let's see how many. Yeah, it's about another half hour left before I'll be done. One of the things, at least I like to do for my own kind of morning study goals, is to is to basically, one of the things I like do when I'm doing a study thing is I don't worry about like trying to say I want to do like one of these a week or something like that. I tend to find that kind of goal doesn't work very well for me. But what does work for me is say, okay, I'll work on this for this amount of time. Yes, it's, unless there's an actual due date, I did that on time. But like I say, I like to work on something for X amount of time and do a certain number of them over that time period. So, like with this one, the goal here is to, say I do a handful of these head sculpts. What I want to do a few lizards, I think, and then I want to do some mammals. But before I do the mammals, I want to understand the fur stuff, the hair stuff, and whether or not that'll take some extra effort, I think. So round. This one's bigger here. And then you should be bigger than this guy. Which you might not expect, something that gets smaller. So that kind of goal setting helps me a lot. Where it's instead of saying, I have to finish a certain number of things in a certain amount of time, and so I'm going to work on something for a certain length and try to get a certain number done while I'm working on that. That's like my study goals. Doesn't work in every situation. Like if you're in a university class or something like that, or a job, you got to get things done. But I think for personal projects like this, clean that up a little bit. Don't forget to save. I think that's probably the way to go. Where kind of set a certain amount of times to work on something, and you'll find like if you do that sort of focus, you get a lot further. Yeah, I'd like to learn some bone stuff. I actually want to do that with robot stuff. It's called IK bones or something like that. I'd like to experiment with that. His mouth doesn't open right. I haven't separated it out, I guess. And set it up to be open. But we'll just do these as studies. Get into sculpting the scales and that a little bit. I wanted to fix these horns up before I got into that. Some of these things start pointing up a little bit more. I'm less interested in animation. There's nothing wrong with animation, but I'm kind of nominally interested in it. Yeah, you can relate. Have you sculpted reptiles before? I've done a handful of finished sculpts over the years, or more or less finished ones. I always like to emphasize that I am not a 3D expert. I am a fan of 3D. I'm more of a 2D, drawing and painting guy. storytelling, that sort of thing. But lately I've been leaning more and more into traditional media. It's like if you're over on YouTube over there, grabs, you look back at what I was doing like a month or whatever ago. It was these acrylic paintings. Yeah, for those who don't know, this is a bearded dragon, not bearded dragon, I keep saying the wrong one. This is a horned lizard. This is what they look like. Right there. If you haven't been in here. Like the stripe of horns on the sides. It's not down the spine, it's down the sides, and there's an extra row that starts up as you get into the tail. So, but they're relatively small. You know, they're not that big. Like their body's smaller than my hand, like maybe the size of my palm, a little bit bigger. And they have a unique survival trait where when they're threatened, because not only are they covered in spikes, which can't be fun to eat, especially if you try to eat whole. But they shoot blood out of their eyes. So they will stare you down and squirt blood, which I think is great. Sometimes I wish I could do that. Yeah, I think it's the AI thing. I'm definitely doing a lot more traditional media stuff. And really, part of what I wanted to learn Blender for is making reference for things that are more custom. But I've definitely been leaning more and more into traditional media. I think there's a couple things. I'm kind of more and more of the attitude that, to a certain degree, it's not an absolute thing. People look at me weird when I say this, but I think digital may have been a mistake. It kind of forced an attitude that said, the most important thing is speed and efficiency in the arts. And I don't know that that's ever been true, even in the professional arts. I mean, you need to get things done on time, and you need to provide people with options. But this idea that you need to do X number of paintings a day, I think you run into some problems with when you do that, when that's your approach. It's not that you don't need to get stuff done. People need things when they need them. But if the benefit is that you're getting more done, well, more isn't necessarily better, right? The more McDonald's burgers you eat, they don't get better. And if you're trying to push out as much stuff as possible, as quickly as possible, there's lost opportunity there, right? There's things that happen when you're making things, inspiration and discoveries that happen in the process of making things that you lose out on if your primary goal is speed. And it's not the same as saying people should be lazy. It's saying if you're not paying attention to what you're doing really closely, and you're not taking advantage of your tools in important ways, you're probably going to lose out on creative opportunity. And slowing down to think, I think, is also really, really important. So if you're just like hammering out as much stuff as fast as you can, you don't have enough time to think about what you're doing. That's one of the problems with generative AI is even if a lot of the other issues around it were solved, like say it was 100% legit data that they were using, perfectly licensed in every way, that didn't cause cognitive decline and environmental issues and all of that. Maybe, I mean, it could be, but you also look at but then then there's Akira, right? um, so I understand like that's more of a production issue, and I'm that's a little bit separate from what I'm generally concerned with in my own work is more of the ideas person. No, I'm not a production person really at all. I mean, maybe I could be one, but that's not never been my interest. These two bumped into each other. So, but I'm looking at things in terms of like, please. Um, but yeah, it depends on what the goal is. But I recently watched, for example, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which is 1971 early Spielberg film, and I was actually only going to watch like the first bit of it just to like look at some of his cinematography. I ended up sitting there just watching the whole thing, and also paying attention to cinematography the whole time. But anyway, one of the things that I was watching, I was like, well, let's see how long the credits are. Right now, you go to a movie and you sit through the credits, and they're like, 20 minutes long, 15 minutes of credits, right? All the CGI, all the compositors, all of the everybody, right, working on the film. And when I watched that one, it was really, 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 really short. Like maybe 5 minutes long at most. And so I was like, wait, how did this movie do when it came out? Because it came out before I was born, even. And I'm not that young. But Josana, Justine. Um, but they spent in today's dollars around $69 million on the movie, and in today's dollars, it made I think about $1 billion. It was a big, big summer blockbuster. It made a lot of money. Or no, yeah, it was 71. I think it was 80s one, something like that. I think it was 71. 71, I think it was Jaws or something. But either way, in today's dollars, it made nearly $1 billion. They spent 69 million on it. It was a major visual effects film. They had all these models and 2D animation and things that were put into it. And it was a studio film, so it's a big, big film, and that's what they spent on it. And I think it's still like there's some things that you might do a little bit better today. Like some of the alien puppets are a little janky at the very end, but even if they were to do those practical today, like it wouldn't cost that much more to like clean up some of the puppetry that they were using and still make it look believable like they do in the film. So it's like they've got this big Marvel movie coming out in December, right? And projections aren't great for it at the moment. I mean, maybe they'll be wrong, but that's one of the things I've been looking at. It's like there's where you look at even more recent films. It's like the Godzilla -1 film. I know they kind of maybe overwork people on the visual effects side, but that's true. You know, big budget Marvel movies too, and but they spent, like, was it 15 million on it? And of course, this summer there's the 2 big horror movies, which I still haven't gotten around to seeing. I want to see both of them: the Obsession film and Backrooms. But yeah, you look at what they spent on those, right? Not that much. Um, and so I've often wondered, because you look at, like, you know, a film opening, you know, the opening credits, and you see all these names in producer category, and I've wondered, like, you know, how much is being lost kind of in that, you know, in that category. Let's see, forward or back. I guess I should move this over and put my face in front, right? I forgot to move that. Well, it's like, you know, you look at Guillermo del Toro's recent Frankenstein movie, right? Like, they had like a 3D printed horse and giant sculptures and real sets. I have a colleague I work with who was, well, I think what it is like, when I like to talk about traditional media. I don't like to say traditional media. I like to say analog. I think that's more accurate and more apt. Let's see, 1, 2, 3 there, and then these guys come out the side. All right, I'm gonna make sure these are flowing the right way. Because you know, I had an interesting conversation. We have a number of, at the university where I teach. A number of our faculty are like Hollywood people. Like, they had a whole career. Let's see, this definitely coming in too deep. Pull that out, I guess. Let's see, we're just starting over here. But I was saying, you know, does it make it? Does he think it makes a difference? And he's more of like a concept artist. He's worked on like big budget movies since the '80s. You know, knows James Cameron and all those people. But I was asking, I was like, what do you think? You know, does it matter if, you know, the sets are real or not? You know, does that affect the performances and the direction? He's like, no, no difference. I don't think I believe him. You know. Yeah, I think people can work around the lack of a real set. Do I make animation? No, I'm not an animator. I think animation is cool, but I am definitely not an animator. So I've taught animation students and I've taught motion design students, but I teach them drawing, or taught them drawing in the past. So this seems to come forward. But yeah, animation is a very, very specific thing, and it's not something I really have any real experience with it. I still have all my audio is working today. I know we're having some trouble a couple days ago where I had unplugged it, and then the other day it was doubling up for some reason the other day. I don't think I changed anything, but there it is. See it on my thing. Yeah, so it's like, I'm not trying to be like anti digital or CGI. I'm just trying to say is that, you know, it's it was kind of put forward as this thing to cut expenses, and we really haven't seen that. It seems like they've managed to come in and fill up all of the make things more expensive, and more often than not, it's been a kind of a failure in a lot of ways where it just doesn't provide the benefit that they say, and a lot of times like there would be really bad CGI. Yeah, it's like I watch a lot of not all the time, but I watch quite a bit of Adam Savage, and he's done these things. I think they're promotional things for some of these auction houses, um, where they're showing props from different films. Like he did one where they were showing off Blade Runner 2049 props, and with the auction house, they're holding the white gloves and they're looking at the different props and things like that. And the guns, they had heft. They had lights that turned on, they clicked, they had vibration and things like that. I think that makes a big difference. If he'd just been holding like a green block in his hand that they would then animate, that doesn't have the same level of interactivity. I think it's true of sets too. I think one of the things that like they did a lot with that Hail Mary movie recently is they built they built the sets for the space station. Or you look at what Nolan does, like in Inception. They're spinning that hallway, and they're really there, spinning around in that hallway. I guess that comes from an anime too. That scene. I don't know that they went up with that or whatever, but so those two need to get closer too, I think. Well, I think one of the other things too that I've been reading about more and more, but with the stylus here, is one of the problems it has. It's like I have like a number of students and like they're deathly afraid of often going into using traditional media. But one of the problems that the stylus has is, in addition, of course, digital being easier, being able to undo, so you don't have to make the same kinds of choices with it. But one of the things you have with it is it actually reduces the varieties of haptic connection, of haptic contact. So haptic is like like your controller for a video game thing, right? They'll have like it will vibrate in your hand when you're shooting things or getting hit by things, right? It's kind of an interesting little feature, right, where you can get that physical contact. Well, it's the same thing with because that physical contact that activates your response more, right? It makes you feel like you're more there, and it's the same thing with your tools. So, if I'm using this as opposed to, so let's grab these guys out of here. As opposed to these things. With a real brush or a real pen or a real nib or a marker, I'm getting different kinds of contact, and you don't get that with this. Even with, like, say, the Apple Pencil that you can put on its side and dip different angles, like, it's still not the same as working with a real pencil. And the pencil and the brushes, they also change over time, right? Their sharpness or their length or their weight, all those things kind of introduce variations in the experience that you don't get with real what I call analog media. And there's studies I know that they've done where it kind of shows the impact of that that haptic connection, the kind of things it does. Like there's studies like showing that handwritten notes are better than digital typed notes. So what they found is like with digital notes where you're typing in a classroom or even writing on a tablet, writing a tablet's a little better though, but even if you're writing digital notes on your you're typing your digital notes into your computer, you'll actually write more notes than you would if you were using a pencil on a notebook. You have to capture more notes, but you retain less information. You don't remember as much, and the notes that you make with a pen and pencil tend to be more useful because they're not trying to cover everything; they're trying to cover important things because you have to be more selective. And of course, there's also the fact that you're making physical contact with pen on paper also makes a big difference too. So that's one of the reasons I said maybe the emphasis, not saying the inclusion, but maybe the emphasis on digital media in illustration and concept art and those kinds of things. I'm wondering more and more if that was like a net negative over time. And so I don't know that we're getting better concepts right for films. I look at a lot of the concept art books. And there's a lot of really great stuff in there, but how does it compare to like Ralph McQuarrie or Sid Mead, as kind of the big classic ones? In terms of like the level of impact that those concepts have. How does it compare to Ron Cobb? Who's, lesser known, but still very important. And I look at it, I'm like, yeah, maybe this is a mistake. If you look at like How to Train Your Dragon, there's that Nicolas Marlet, who's designed all the dragons and things, or worked on Kung Fu Panda, and he's working with a pen and he's working with basically with a pen, some colored pencils, and whiteout usually often on brown paper. And those characters, have made them billions and billions of dollars. Even if what's his face, the cartoonist who's worked on a lot of the Blue Sky stuff. I can't remember his name right now. He's done a ton of like New Yorker covers, but he did a lot of character designs for Blue Sky, especially for more well known probably for the Ice Age stuff. And he's like it's just like a pencil, colored pencil. That's all he's using to draw with. Sends that off to them. And that was after digital was already kind of overtaken most of that market. So that's kind of one of the things that's been on my mind a lot lately is those two things. So I look at the students I work with at my university or online, and I wonder, did we do a disservice by making digital too early? I'm starting to hear some universities, partially due, I think, in response to AI, but also just in general, like they're banning digital stuff in classrooms. Computers and iPads and phones and all of that stuff. Yeah, with the refining and clay and that, isn't there a video game that someone's putting out that's like it's claymation, or they were physical sculptures, clay sculptures and things that they made and then scanned in. I remember seeing some art and ads or something for it. I should look into it more deeply. But I remember seeing that. Um, but I know this kind of again this old school another old school concept guy from the '80s, and he's still active or was until a couple years ago. Working in video games and film, different one than one I was talking about before that I worked with directly. Um, and he remembers, when everything transitioned to digital, and he said it was basically this weird kind of cult thing where, like, if you didn't go digital, everyone thought you were some kind of weirdo. They would, make fun of you, not hire you if you weren't going full digital. There's always a weird way of doing anything, right? It's approaching things that way. Peter DeSev, that's what I was thinking of. Peter DeSev was the guy with the blue sky. DESEVV. But there's a number of things I've been thinking about lately along those lines where it's like, well, what if, what if we're doing things backwards a little bit? It's not that, digital is bad necessarily, it's just that it's, what if it's kind of getting in your way? Well, I think it's done a couple of things. One is, I think it lets people in who shouldn't be there. So, because it's easier to use, it opens the door to people that don't have to try as hard to get in the professions, and that may include me. Like, I jumped on digital when it started being a thing when I was in school, and I was doing mostly digital by the time I graduated. Yeah, well, I'm old enough too to remember life without the internet too. So I'm starting to think maybe it was better in some ways, not in every way, but I think part of it is just because they've made the internet such a awkward place to be. But I just remember, tech was a bit more exciting. Oh, there's this new thing coming out. Isn't that great? Um, and I miss my mini disc player. I look at them on eBay once in a while. I consider picking up one, but then there's a whole thing where I'd have to put everything onto the discs. I feel like that would just take it would take like a week to get all my old music on there. Well, I have started buying Blu-rays recently. I want to dump most of my streaming services, if not all of them, over the next little while. Like I've got like a ton of movies on Apple TV that I bought over the years, and that's convenient if I'm traveling or something like that. But so yeah, so I definitely remember the pre-internet era. I remember like having to go onto my university campus to access the internet, or getting those AOL discs in the mail. What's funny is when I had roommates as a student, um, we would actually take turns with the AOL discs. So it was like six of us in the place, and you got like 2 months or a month or whatever for free. And so we would all kind of like take turns with the disc. So they'd send them in the mail, and then one person would sign up for that one, and then another person would sign up for the next one. And, there was even a point where there was a company offering free internet if you signed up on their, if you agree to get emails from them. So you got advertising emails if you signed up for their advertising emails. We did that for a bit too. I forget to say, right? So, there's stuff like that where it's like, maybe certain things weren't such a good idea. Yeah, still, like I always did traditional media because that was, all of my teachers, like we only had like a few classes that were digital. Like there was a typography class. There was some aspects of my 2D design class. That were digital early on, like early Photoshop, early Illustrator, where you had to close one. If you wanted to copy and paste between them, you couldn't have them both open at the same time. So you would copy something, and then you'd have to close it, and then open the other one and paste it in. So, we had like typography class. We had a single digital illustration class, and then I was kind of mostly doing it on my own. But most of my classes were all traditional media, and I think that was probably better for me. Of course, back then you could get like a good job in game art if you had like some decent figure drawings. I graduated in 2004 from university, but so yeah, definitely remember all of that. I missed that. I did miss that mini disc player. So I remember like the sound it makes when you like slotted the disc in there. Yeah, but you kind of look at that. Or you look at like what happened recently with Sony, where they ended a licensing agreement with film distribution, and they deleted everybody's films. All you have is that license. You don't own the physical. You don't own the physical copy of the disc. Like they should have a thing where if that's going to happen, like people can download them. Maybe there is some kind of DRM where they got to sign up. They're no longer kept on the servers or whatever. But you read stuff like that, or the push on, like PlayStation announced they're getting rid of their physical drives. People are like, wait a second. Even though, like I mostly buy games on Steam, and even on my, I have a PlayStation 4 I bought a long time ago that I haven't really turned on. I turned it on recently to try out, putting a DVD in there. But I haven't turned it on to play a game on it like in 2 or 3 years. It took a while to update it. when I turned it on, it was like it didn't like being turned on after being off for so long. It was upset with me. Yeah, it did get me thinking, like, maybe. So I look at these streaming services, right? So if you've got a few different ones, if you were to instead, buy Blu-rays, say, off of eBay for that were used or whatever, or even just brand new ones, a few every month or one every month, or or use the same budget you use for, a streaming service, for that instead. Like, how big would your DVD collection be by the end of the year? After 2 years, and with the streaming services, you don't get anything that's permanent. It's just gone when it's gone. And it can be nice to have, or the unique stuff that they do on there. But a lot of that stuff has ended up on DVD before. Then you actually have that asset. And it's yours to permanently enjoy. All right, so I've been on, I think, for an hour and a half, a little bit longer. So that's my budgeted time for the morning. I appreciate everybody that came in. Should be back around the same-ish time tomorrow. Hopefully a little bit earlier. I'm trying to get up here and started a little bit earlier. I do wake up pretty early as it is. I get the dog out for WALK. He's sleeping under my feet right now. Actually, here's the show shot with the webcam. There he is down there. Looking at me like, what you pointing at that thing for? Huh? There it is. There we go. That's Bosch. So, yeah, appreciate everybody that came in. I'll be back tomorrow morning for sure. I might be in this evening. If a stylus is easier than a mouse, yes, especially for sculpting, because it's got pressure sensitivity. So so all that means is the harder I push hard, I get a big stroke, like that. Push soft, I get a smaller stroke. So it makes a big difference. This is a Wacom Cintiq. It's a little bit older one now. It was newish when I got it. It's big. But if you're trying to sculpt with a mouse, I feel sorry for you. You can get very cheap tablets. You don't necessarily need to get a screen tablet. Like, I like those. There's a bunch of newer companies that make even screen tablets. But you can get like a tablet that's, say, if you're outside the United States, about A5 size. Actually, I think is a really good size to work with if you're using like a little handheld tablet. Maybe A4. Those are really cheap. So they're like, you can buy them for $20 or $40 or whatever, depending on the size and the company and the sale. Like, they're really inexpensive. So if you're trying to experimenting, that's a good place to start, is with one of those kinds of tablets. So anyway, thanks for coming in, and we'll talk to you all later.